Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. All right, so I am here with Drew. And you're representing the New Hampshire Turtle Rescue, and we're here today at the Woodman Museum's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles gallery unveiling. And tell me a little bit about the work that you do with the rescue, and may I ask, did the popularity of the Ninja Turtles influence you getting involved in this at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast, first of all. And I run New Hampshire Turtle Rescue along with my wife, Dallas. We've been doing it since 2022 is when we first got established. We incorporated as a public charity in 2023, and our mission is to rescue, rehabilitate, release, and preserve the 7 native species of turtle that we have here in New Hampshire. So of those 7 native species, 4 of them are listed by the state as being threatened or endangered with extinction. So we do what we can to help turtles that have been hit by cars or attacked by dogs or injured or sick in other ways, help to rehabilitate them and get them back out into the wild where they belong.
Let me ask real quick, because I've had 2 encounters with snapping turtles.
Yeah.
They're native to New Hampshire.
They are, yes.
And what is the best way to help a snapping turtle across the road? Because the 2 times I tried, I learned it was not the best way to try. But
yeah, you will learn very quickly that they are strong animals. And so it comes down to what you're most comfortable with, right? So putting yourself in danger is never something that we advise people to do. So you want to pull over when you see a snapping turtle that's getting ready to cross the road or in the road. Make sure you're somewhere safe first, and then when you get out to help that turtle, you're going to want to make sure that you stay behind it. So snapping turtles, the front kind of third of their body, you can consider their strike zone. So they can reach their neck backwards, behind, to the side. They can't really reach it down below them. But they have a pretty formidable snap. They can't take off your finger or anything like that. That's an urban legend. But they can deliver a pretty painful bite, so you want to stay away from their
serious
their
claws
spicy
too.
end. Yeah, and that's the other thing. If you look at their limbs and their claws, they have claws that are close to the size of bear claws, and they can scratch you up pretty good too. So that's aside from the mouth, that's the other big thing that we tell people to be aware of is those claws, because they can scratch you up pretty good. When you're trying to move a turtle, if it's a big, heavy turtle, it can be difficult to actually physically lift them up. And so usually, with smaller snapping turtles, you can kind of grip them in the lower back of their, the very back of their shell has kind of like, it almost looks like serrations, like a little picket fence type thing. But if you grab underneath that, it's almost like a little handle. And when they're small enough, you can pick them up and move them pretty easily. Okay. Now, the bigger guys, that's a little bit more difficult. And so what we end up doing is what we call the platter hold, where we put one of our hands underneath the turtle to support it, and then we put our other hand on top of the back, either the base of the tail to control, or the top of the shell in the back as well to give extra control. And then we kind of, lift them up like a platter, like you're, a waiter or something like that, and carry it across the road like that. Now, if it's too heavy for you and you're comfortable putting it on something like a car mat, a piece of cardboard you have in your car, even a piece of bark that you find on the side of the road, a collection of branches, anything you can get that turtle on that you can then drag across the road, that's great. Sometimes turtles, snapping turtles, if you just kind of like coax them, they'll willingly kind of go across the road, but some will be a little ornery or feel threatened and turn around and kind of, raise their back ends up and hiss at you and stuff. So
one of them was biting my shoe when I was trying to get it across. And I'm like, you have no idea, buddy. I'm trying to save you.
He probably had no idea you were trying to help him,
He's like, I'm not going across the street. Yeah. They all look like they talk like they're from New York City or something. And so that kind of...
They look like they have a little bit of attitude to them, it's true. But we like to tell people that they are not aggressive, right? They're not going to go... Snapping turtles never come at you and attack you.
Right.
They only want to get away from you. The only time they ever snap at you is when you're directly in front of them and harassing them. They will never come at you and try to bite you. So they are defensive exclusively. They aren't aggressive. And they don't bite at all in the water. There's never been a recorded case of somebody getting attacked by a snapping turtle in the water. So no need to be afraid of them in ponds. If there's one living in your pond, it'll stay far away from you. If you're swimming, you don't have anything to be afraid of.
And that seems to be true for...
They're one of the sweetest turtles. They really are. They really are. Super intelligent, super sweet. They have a bad reputation, and it's totally undeserved. So...
Well, they got incorporated into the Ninja Turtle story in the second movie. I remember that.
That's right.
Toka, I think it was.
Yeah.
So have you been a lifelong fan of Ninja Turtles? And
I have. I grew up, I was born in 85, so I was late 80s, early 90s kid, and watching the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, animated series along with the live action movies that came out were, pretty much a cornerstone of my childhood, along with the video games as well.
Yeah.
It's, interestingly though, the connection there wasn't necessarily an inspiration for the work that I do now with wild turtles here in New Hampshire. It was kind of a different route that I, took to get to that.
Well, the only reason I asked is because I think about things like, they call it the Jurassic Park effect. That after Jurassic Park came out, there was
another movie I
probably
loved.
about 18 years, almost exactly, after that. So early 2000s or so, there was a lot of... Actually, even less than that, because it wasn't like you were born watching Jurassic Park. But kids who watched Jurassic Park, they had a much higher enrollment rate of paleontology majors because they were so inspired by the movie and all the connected media and toys and everything that they just said, I want to study dinosaurs. And that's how they got into it. So that kind of effect. Well, you chose the original Nintendo game.
That's right.
Which, not to be confused with the one that came out not long afterwards, which was the home version of the arcade game, which is fantastic.
It is.
But
beat 'em up style.
This one, that one, the one we're going to talk about is, I think, usually listed as one of the most difficult video games and frustrating video games.
Certain level in particular, yeah.
I think we both know the underwater level where you have
That's right. Those electric seaweeds.
Why did Nintendo make this video game really before... It feels like before Turtle Mania really took off. And maybe it contributed to Turtle Mania in its own way. But why do you think they went ahead and made this game?
That's a good question, and it seems like there are probably a number of layers there. I'm no expert on video game history or, Nintendo history or anything like that, but I'm glad to conjecture about, what I think. And, growing up at the time, I definitely didn't have, my finger on the pulse of what was, culturally new or breaking boundaries. I was just playing fun video games. But my guess is that, the Nintendo was probably one of the first. You had things like the, ColecoVision, Commodore 64, and Atari, those type of home gaming consoles previously, but they didn't. It seemed like the Nintendo was the first one that really had widespread adoption, right? Super Mario Brothers, really took hold in the consumer market, unlike other video games had before. And so I think it was probably a mixture of both having, that new market capitalization perhaps that Nintendo had. Again, I'm no expert on this, so I might be totally off base. And also the, desire for intellectual properties at the time to use this new media, right? So it's an exciting thing, especially something like a comic book and an animated series. Those things seem to lend themselves pretty well to video games, especially because the animation, kids can see something animated on TV and then animated on their, Nintendo system, and it's not too far away from something like the E.T. video game being made. That
which is also categorized as equally as frustrating.
Yeah,
but unlike this one, at least this one
has good play mechanics. You can actually play it in certain ways. The
challenge isn't
because you're, handicapped by the actual controls themselves in some way. So, it's I don't know what the actual answer might be, but it seemed like a good confluence of things that kids are interested in. And I think a lot of, at least for me, I know the Legend of Zelda. When my parents got the NES that we had as a kid, my parents were staying up all night playing Legend of Zelda. It wasn't me and my sister who were playing the games all the time. Then eventually we got into it and started becoming video gamers. But when that first came out, it was my parents who were playing it more than anything. And I still have somewhere all the maps of the dungeons that my dad would hand draw, trying to get through them and everything. And so I think it was maybe also an attempt to start getting kids into video games as well, right? Kids were into the Ninja Turtles, especially the animated series. I guess I don't know how much adults were into that too, but I'm sure it has some appeal to adults.
Well, I think about the cover art for this game, and it was almost like coded information in that late 80s era of which Ninja Turtles properties were for older kids and adults and which Ninja Turtle properties were meant for the younger kids. And the cover art of this has the four turtles wearing the red masks, which means it's coming from the original comic series. And they look pretty fearsome in it, like that cover art. It's very dark. It's not dreary, but it's almost noir. It's exciting. And so when I first played this game, I was attracted because I love turtles, but I think I kind of read that code already. I was like, okay, this is not the cartoon version.
Yeah.
That wouldn't come out for another year or so. And I remember the very first time I saw the 4-player, which honestly, the 4 characters, it's tailor-made for a 4-player game.
Yeah.
It's weird on the
2-player
this version,
NES,
like you can't even play at the same time.
Yeah,
it's just 1 player at a time. Like if you do a 2-player mode, I think it has, you have to alternate turns, and like the turtles they die. Like you can't use them after, and they shrink back to, like, that's part of the when you quote unquote die, the mutation reverses and you go back into a regular sized turtle, so it's not too disturbing. But when the one came out in the arcade, I'll never forget it. I was actually a few miles from here at the mall. I was at a birthday party for a friend, and they must have been either loaded or knew somebody, because they had the entire Dream Machine arcade reserved just for this kid's party. And
awesome.
Like the entire party was just crowded around this brand new machine, and we're all playing it. And I became obsessed with it because it was it was more from the cartoon series. Like the turtles had different colored masks.
Right.
The first boss was Bebop, I think, or Rocksteady. Yeah, Rocksteady. And so he's from the cartoon more so than the comic. This game that we're talking about was a trajectory from the comic more than it was. And do you think that's maybe why it's maybe didn't hit the home run that they were looking for?
Yeah, it's possible. It could have just been the format of the video game as well. But having it be kind of a stepping stone may have been the, maybe if it was more aligned with, if it came out a year later after the, animated series and all that stuff started, becoming a bit more popular, maybe it would have caught on a little bit more. Maybe if it was aligned a little bit more with that. Because for me, I don't have as much familiarity with the comics, right? Most of mine, even though I grew up playing that video game, I never read the original comics. It never, I was an animated series guy, so I kind of lumped that all in with the same series the same era of Ninja Turtles as well. So for someone like me who grew up with those video games, I kind of lack that entire where it came from and the kind of origin of it, and that it was a stepping stone to the next one.
I would say from 86 until the movie came out, and I think 90, it was like a tangled up knot of, because even I have a couple issues, I think it was like second or third run issues of the original comic, and they're advertising the toys in there, which the toys are and so unlike a lot of like a lot of series in the 80s, the toys came first, then the cartoon came after to sell the toys. But I feel like, there's all these different subcategories of fans, and for a lot of them it was, the original comic was, it was a little bit, I don't want to say subversive, but it was definitely edgy. It was definitely underground. It had that appeal to it, black and white, it was very, it was much darker, like I said before, than what the cartoon would, the Archie comics that they would make, for the cartoonish more, ones. So I think, but one thing that all the different groups shared was, access to a Nintendo. Right. Yeah. So like you might like, I don't like to watch a cartoon on Saturday morning. I like getting my comic books, and reading them in my dorm room or my apartment or something like that. Cause I'm, 19 years old and, that's more for me, but I have a Nintendo. But the 8-year-old who likes watching the cartoon every Saturday morning, they are saying, I have a Nintendo too. So this game was probably, I think if anybody's going to enjoy it, it would be from that first group that was like, yeah, this is, because even the bad guys seem to be closer to the comic, the original comics. Right. Baxter Stockman. I don't know if the Shredder's even in this one. Maybe at the very end.
Yeah, but I don't know if I ever got to the very end.
Yeah, nobody did. Maybe it exists, and like maybe by the end it gets a lot more like the cartoon, but nobody ever has found out because they've never done well. But it just speaks to all of those, like, there's almost like several different pop culture economies existing all at one time, and they weren't necessarily trying to capture as many audience members as possible. It was like, here's the game for this plane of Ninja Turtles existence, right? And don't worry, kids, we'll have one for you coming out soon that's going to have a lot more recognizable cartoon stuff in it. But I get a good memory unlock when I see this game, because we never had Nintendo when I was a kid. We had Atari. Like that's most my parents would go, but we were allowed to rent Nintendos every so often. And whenever we rented a console, we would get maybe 2 or 3 games for the weekend too. And I'll never forget getting this game and just being like, oh man, like this isn't the one we thought it was. Like this isn't the arcade one. This is the much more. No wonder it was available, because
right.
Otherwise, if it was the good one, everybody would be, all of it. So before we go, if you don't mind telling us where we can find more about New Hampshire Turtle Rescue and how people can help.
Sure. Yeah, we have a website at newhampshireturtlerescue.org or nhturtlerescue.org. We are also present on all the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. You can find us there and see all the work that we do.
And if somebody were to come across a turtle that looks like it's out of place or in distress, do you guys...
If you come across a turtle that looks like it's in distress, or if you just don't know why if you have any questions about any of the wild turtles you may see, something nesting, something in your yard, anything like that, feel free to give us a call. Our number is 603-417-4944, and we are glad to answer any questions or calls that you have.
And if you see them walking around inside of some kind of green goo, some kind of ooze, then you just wait a little while and they'll turn into walking, talking Ninja Turtles. So thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Take care. Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything as a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.